There are thousands and thousands of people all over the country who are looking for a way to do what we do in law enforcement, that is help defend your country from threat, both foreign and domestic, and go back to the constitutional principles that our country was founded on.
I do not know you, but I am your brother.
You do not know me, but I am your protector.
I will run into a burning building to save your life.
Though I do not know your name, I will take a bullet for you.
Though we've never met,
I believe in duty
and sacrifice of self.
Your family is my family.
Is my family. Your life is my duty.
What's going on, guys? Time for another episode of Behind the Uniforms. For those of you who have never seen this series before, the way that we work is that we invite first responders, active, retired, veterans to come on the show to tell you about a good day, tell you about a bad day, tell you a little bit about what they're doing, and show that the men and women behind the uniforms are just like you and I. So I am obviously either underdressed or you guys are way overdressed, but many of you probably remember this guy from a previous episode. So let's start with you. Tell them who you are.
Thank you, Kyle. My name is Jeff Epstein. I head up an organization called Healing the Wounds, and basically we're dedicated to mentoring the forgotten children of our nation's heroes in law enforcement and the military. It's a brand new initiative. We just launched it. Prior to that, I spent about 13 years on the front lines combating terrorism, and the most unique person that I ever crossed paths with, and I worked with for a little better than a decade, was the DHS whistleblower, Philip Haney.
I like how you snuck yourself in for a cameo here by bringing some dinner to the table. I like that. So you're up. Tell them who you are, and then let's dive into how you guys met.
Well, my name is Philip Haney. I'll start with saying that I'm a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security, and you may or may not think that's a good thing, but the point I bring up is that I was there from the very beginning. And I took an oath to defend our country, and I spent a lot of time before 9/11 in the Middle East. So when 9/11 came, I signed up. I went to our congressman in Georgia, said, sign me up, I want to help. There must be something I can do. I found myself in the Department of Homeland Security. I started doing intel briefings and working cases, ended up at the National Targeting Center in Washington, D.C., and the elite unit called the Advanced Targeting Team, where I started working on the big cases, global level cases. And that's basically where I ran into trouble with the Obama administration, because they began to shut the cases down. I retired honorably in July 31st of 2015, and ever since then, what is that, 2.5 years from now, I've been on the road all over the country, northeast, southwest, up in Seattle, down in Florida. Plus, I've been on the Hill more than 60 times, talking to congressmen and the general public about the nature of the threats we face vis-a-vis national security and counterterrorism. And that's why I'm here today, because I took a vow, and even though I'm retired from federal service, my vow is still active duty, and I have to keep going, just like this river right outside your building. I'm going to keep going till we get a resolution on this, and hopefully 2018 is going to be a big turning point year. I think a lot of people feel that.
Turning point for the good or turning point for the bad?
Yes, for the better, for the good, yes. That a lot of the effort, a lot of the seeds that have been planted, a lot of the background, and a lot of the foundational work that's been done is going to start bearing some fruit in 2018. That's my hope, and I'm going to do everything I can to help make that happen.
I know you're not running for office, but I would vote for you, just like that alone. You got maybe close the deal.
Traveling around the country, you get a perspective that only people who are running for national office get. Because see, a local district or state office, you see your state or your district. But when you travel all over the country, you get a sense of what's going on nationwide. And I can tell you that our country we're standing up for. There are thousands and thousands of people all over the country who are looking for a way to do what we do in law enforcement, that is help defend your country from threat, both foreign and domestic, and go back to the constitutional principles that our country was founded on. And even if somebody's watching who never took the oath, don't feel left out. You can take the oath. You can take the oath as a civilian and do just as much as a law enforcement officer or first responder or military person. It's that's how the country was founded.
So let's go to you two. How'd you two meet?
How did we meet? I was...
So I heard something about hitchhiking?
Well, I think he was kidding about that. Maybe he was.
And it didn't take place on a bar stool, Kyle, either, so.
I think that I was in one of many crises that I went through when I was active duty, because I was investigated 9 times by my own administration for simply investigating, following the trail, the individuals and the organizations related to these global Islamic groups. And in 2009, I was ordered to take all the intelligence information out of the system. Some of you guys out there know what TECS is, T-E-C-S. It's our law enforcement database. I call it an archive database. And I had put hundreds and hundreds of records into the system, which I was authorized to do. That was my job. And the Obama administration came in and told me I had to take it all out because it might violate the civil rights or civil liberties or privacy rights of foreign nationals and or lawful permanent residents. We call them green card holders. And to imply that these individuals might be affiliated with terrorism was basically racist or discriminatory or biased or something along that line. And so I was in a crisis. Wouldn't you be?
Yeah.
You're
You took an
ordered
oath.
not to approach the enemy, or you're ordered to look the other way when there's a burglary ring operating right in your own town. You're not supposed to go investigate that case. You're not authorized to do it. What would you do?
Well, I mean, this is the same time that the Obama administration was on a daily basis changing the rules of engagement for the men and women who were fighting overseas. So it doesn't really surprise me. It's
a great point. It's all it really is about rules of engagement. Every arena, military, law enforcement, counterintelligence, the Obama administration intruded into those arenas and shut us down. It's all about rules of engagement. You can't fire in that direction. You can't approach those individuals. You have to just pretend that they're not there. That's fatal, right?
absolutely.
If I may interject, when Philip first came into my life, this was probably, once again, around 10, 11 years ago, I couldn't believe what was happening because early on, he had identified 300 individuals and organizations approximately that were tied to the jihad and posing a threat to every man, woman, and child on American soil, and he could not advance his information up through the, let's say, politically correct channels, the supervisory levels of the Department of Homeland Security.
Well, you see it a lot today. That's the amazing thing. I'm satisfied and I'm positive and optimistic because I'm seeing the things that I talked about 5, 10 years ago coming out in the mainstream media every day now. Mm-hmm. I was telling the truth the whole time. And I'm not pushing the rock up the hill anymore.
Right.
Now the rock is going to start rolling downhill. And the same things that we see, the IRS, the Fast and Furious, the emails, the shutdown of the Hezbollah case, Operation Cassandra, and several other ones that we could name. The Mueller investigation is going right now with partisans that are in the FBI investigating Trump who are actually supporting Hillary Clinton. Those kind of things. They started inside, like a slow motion explosion, and just worked their way out into the general public, and now everybody's starting to see it.
Let me ask you something. You mentioned in the beginning that you took an oath to protect against threats, both foreign and domestic. It seems to me that that's sort of a domestic threat, arguably, no?
Well, weren't our founding fathers geniuses?
They were.
They weren't just focused in one direction and didn't think about what was behind them, so to speak. Foreign and domestic. The forces of gravity that oppose our sovereignty, because that's what we're really talking about, the right to have a form of government that we choose. The Constitution and the Declaration are really legal briefs, descriptions of what our sovereignty offers to us.
Sure.
So the threat of sovereignty is more fundamental even than the threat against the Constitution. And you have the global Islamic movement on one side, and you have the progressive Antifa, I call it the red side. And both of them have in common that as it's in Declaration of Independence, they seek to alter or abolish the current form of government and replace it with one that's more suitable to their worldview. Isn't that more fundamental, or perhaps the most fundamental? That's the foundation of the natures of the threats we face, is an attack on our sovereignty. They want to replace our constitutionally described sovereignty with Sharia law or some undefined, more inclusive, more diverse kind of form of government. And that's what they have in common. So when I took the vow, I look at it from a constitutional perspective and protection of sovereignty. It isn't a bias against a religion or an ethnic group of people. It's according to Article 6 of the Constitution, that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and that the judges of each state should abide thereby. And we have seen plenty of examples lately of judges of states and circuits not abiding by constitutional principle. So that is the nature of the battle that we face, sovereignty.
Is it just me, or does it seem like a lot of it's coming from the West Coast right now? The
the
Ninth Court of Appeals, sanctuary state. I mean,
Yeah.
how have we gotten to a place in society where you can hold a federally appointed position and not enforce the very law that you were appointed to enforce? How do you fix that? How do we fix that?
Because they're more beholden to the party politics and basically maintaining their positions. Because the more of these people that they allow to come into the country and stay here, the more will vote in favor of maintaining them in their political positions. That's what's going on.
How do we address that? Looking
I see
at
it
things
like
from a
an
constitutional
addiction, friend.
perspective.
I do. It's like these people have become addicted to the ideology and the benefits they receive by promoting that ideology. And anyone knows who's ever struggled with any form or had somebody in their family who did, the very first step forward is to just plainly acknowledge that I have at least a 1%. If I can handle 1% of responsibility for the fact that I am an addict, that's that first step out of it, is to recognize that constitutional principles are being violated, and then take the actions that are authorized by the Constitution to amend it. Fire them, remove them, change the rulings, whatever combination. And I'm starting to see that. The judiciary is being rebuilt, just like this building. It was almost abandoned for a long time, or maybe it was. Pigeons flying around in the top. And now life has come back. One step at a time, right?
It was either Jefferson or Franklin, forgive my history, but one of them, I want to say it was Franklin, said, when people learn they can vote themselves money, it will herald the end of the republic. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of a crazy foreshadowing of where we are in society these days.
You could add or power, or influence, or benefit, or retirement benefit.
Yep.
All under the category. Money is just an expression of some sort of... There's a difference between a politician and a statesman. A politician is a salesman. He sells himself. He may not be capable or competent for the job, but he's a good salesman, versus a statesman who might also be good at expressing his opinion, but he's based on Constitution, and he won't violate that oath of office. And we have way too many politicians and not nearly enough statesmen. So that's why our founding fathers set our government up as a government of, for, and by the people. So to answer your question partly, even at its very, very best, the federal government is not designed to reach down and push the magic easy button at the local level. That's the responsibility of the people who live there. If they do that, then there will be a connection between the federal and the local, and it works the way it was designed. And the problem with the gap is, I will say, that one of the things that I've learned is the people at the grassroots level don't realize how much authority they actually have.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of
they've
frustration
lost sight
on that
of it.
level.
Sure, of course.
Nobody knows what they
It's
can
been
do.
Of course.
taken away from them, and some of them didn't even know that they ever had it. They have like an inheritance that they never realized that they had. Like in the fairy tale movies, the princess. She didn't even know she was a princess. She was Cinderella. And all of a sudden she discovers that she's part of a royal family. Well, the American people have a heritage. It's embedded in our Constitution. And we've gotten too far away from that. Now, my hope is to help steer us back into the middle of the lane. The car has been off the side of the road. We went off the side during the snowstorm, kind of. But now we've been able to get the car back up. We've got some traction. Now we're sitting on the road, and the question will be in 2018, can we get some momentum going and reach the finish line? I believe we can.
So talk to me about whistleblowing, the book, and what 2018 holds for law enforcement.
Okay. Whistleblowing is like the old-fashioned biblical form of a watchman on the wall. There sounds the trumpet. And that's what we're required to do all the way back to the Founding Fathers. They were essentially whistleblowers. Taxation without representation.
Yep.
Dropping the boxes of tea over the harbor, with ships in the harbor, was a form of making an announcement. Well, I didn't designate myself as a whistleblower. Actually, Congress did. Because technically, to be formally recognized as a whistleblower, your own agency has to designate you as one. And how likely is that going to be?
Right.
Not very likely. So I became known as a whistleblower because of the more than 60 times that I've gone to Congress in the last 5 years. They call me that. But what I actually did is simply show them the information that we have known about for 10 or 15 years about these individuals and organizations that pose a threat to our country. It's not like it's been a great mystery.
Right.
And I had the authority, and legally I could show them that information. And that's what I did. I literally showed them. Here's the nature of the threat. There's these individuals. There's these organizations. I have an allegory or an illustration in the book. I told you earlier I was an entomologist.
Yep.
That's a person who studies insects. And I was a field agricultural entomologist. I helped farmers find ways of reducing pesticide. And in that, I became an international level scientist, and I traveled all over the world. But I had a particular emphasis in the Middle East. This is all before 9/11. And I worked in vacation wonderlands like Yemen.
Oh, jeez.
Yes, and Eritrea, and Egypt, not so bad in Egypt. What is now more commonly called the West Bank, Israel, Jordan. I worked in the Middle East. And I saw, like Don Henley, the wild-eyed pistol wavers that aren't afraid to die, up close and personal, before 9/11 ever happened. And I had an interest in language and in theology, so I studied the Quran. I also have had an interest in strategy and tactics. So I studied the global Islamic movement from a strategic and tactical perspective based on the Quran, not on political ideology. I just took them at face value. And it wasn't theoretical for me, because I was there and I saw these guys.
Sure.
So when 9/11 happened, of course, for all of us, everything changed in a second of time. And I knew that the only thing that I could do was find a way to go in and help. And I found a way. And everything was great for the first 2 or 3 years. After the Department of Homeland Security was officially stood up in March of 2003, I was sending intel briefings up the chain of command, doing briefings to management, and I was getting special assignments and interviewing potential terrorists, literally sitting like you and me, that would come into the country on a flight. They come through primary with their passport, welcome to America, and we would like you to come to, this officer will escort you over to
come have
this
a cup of
little
coffee.
room. That's what I did. I used coffee cup interview. I would literally give them a cup of coffee, because anyone who's worked in the Middle East knows that a very polite thing to do is offer people coffee. So here they come, they meet this guy, they're afraid of him, or they're not afraid of him. In some cases they weren't afraid of me, because I'm not a very, threatening kind of individual.
Yeah.
So I give them a coffee, I start asking about their family, and where they grew up, and then I'll start asking them a more detailed question. You know, something about the Quran. You know, what do you think of Quran, chapter 191? Or what do you think of the phrase, "Fakhduluhum"? What does that mean to you? It's not a cuss word, though it does sound like one. It means slaughter them. And there was the moment, the deer in the headlights moment. There was always one. Wait a minute, I thought you were a nice guy. And all of a sudden you're asking me this very pointed question. You're not supposed to know things like that. And there is that moment, and it's so incredible. Anybody in your audience that's ever done this kind of work knows what I'm talking about. A moment when you see the switch, when the person changes from, let's say, adversarial or reluctant to submissive. After all, Islam means to submit. And in the hierarchy of the Islamic worldview, if you encounter somebody with more authority than you are, you reflexively submit to it. And I would see these individuals turn from adults, in a sense, into children.
Wow.
And I would ask them anything, and they would tell me. What
crazy.
Organizations are you part of? What masjid do you attend? What's the name of your imam? Things like that. And I would network their whole life. And then I would connect them to other people. And then I would put that information in the system, and it would be available to all my colleagues in Customs and Border Protection and Border Patrol and ICE and so on. And we would start working the case together.
Well, it was the point of the formation
That's
of
the
Department
whole
of Homeland
point of it.
Security was the interagency cooperation
That was
and
supposed to
intel
be.
sharing.
Yes.
What happened?
It was shut down. I'd say it started, the first signs of it, the submarine coming up out of the water, were around 06. And then in 08, following the election in November of 08, President Obama, one of the first things that he did was shut down the Holy Land Foundation trial, which was the largest counterterrorism case we'd ever tried. It was tried by the Department of Justice, and we never touched it again. This recent news about the Hezbollah smuggling, that's not the first time this has happened. The first time it happened had to do with the Muslim Brotherhood organizations operating in the United States. They not only shut down the investigations, they actually literally went in and deleted the information out of the system. So you're talking about a black hole in law enforcement that's created, like a rip in the space-time continuum. And as time goes on, that hole gets bigger and bigger, because that information has not only been removed, but there's nothing new replacing it. So as time goes, it stretches bigger and bigger. And that's why we have come to the place we are now. We barely seem to be able to tell our left hand from our right hand, because the information was removed 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. There's no point of reference. That's a cardinal sin in the intelligence communities, to remove information. Because if you have a big giant string of keys, big ring of them, and you come up to this building in the old days before it was revitalized, the only way you're going to find out which key fits which lock is spend an awful lot of time going around trying all these keys. Waste of time. How about just go to the red key on the ring, that opens the main door, and in you go. 2 seconds, you're in. See, and that's why removing information is so dangerous, because we lose our bearing. We're flying blind. So they took this information out of the system starting in 09. Then I found myself at the National Targeting Center, the secret squirrel headquarters of DHS, working on another case on a group called Tablighi Jamaat. And Tablighi Jamaat means Party of Promoters of Islam. And they're from the Indian subcontinent. They actually came from a town called Deoband, which is in north-central India. They started in the 1860s, and they are Salafi, doesn't mean radical, it means original form of Islam, Sunni, kind of like Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia, a group of pro-jihad, pro-Sharia Muslims, 75 to 125 million members around the world. They're called the Army of Darkness because they infiltrate governments and salt society like water in a sponge from underneath up. I started noticing these guys coming into the country in groups of 3, 4, and 5 as early as 06.
Jeez.
I would interview them. A lot of times on primary. I'd tell my colleague, we have rovers. They're out in the lines when you're coming in from an international flight. And I'd say, Charlie, Sam, something. See those guys over there? Send them over to my line. So they'd maneuver them over and they'd come to my line. Hello, sir. Welcome to America. May I see your passport, please? And I see you're transiting through Caracas, Venezuela. I see. What's the purpose of your trip today? And they wouldn't want to tell me. And then I'd look at them straight in the eye. And I'd say, you're top leaguey, aren't you? Big eyes, deer in the headlight. Not supposed to know things like that.
What do you do with that?
Well, if they're transiting, we let them go. But they have to come back.
Got it.
When they come back, we do a secondary interview. We call it an outbound interview, and I found out where they go. I found out through this work that the largest mosque in South America was in Caracas, Venezuela. And it's the Tablighi Jamaat Mosque, this group from the Indian subcontinent. You're going to ask me in a minute, I'm sure you're already thinking, so what does this have to do with anything? It has to do with the San Bernardino attack.
Got it.
The guy, Syed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik, and the masjid that they went to, Deobandi Masjid. Those records, I started working on a case in 06, 07, 8, 9. I ended up getting promoted and I went to the National Targeting Center there in Washington, and I worked on the same case, my case, at the National Targeting Center and turned it into what we call an initiative. That's a global level case. First there's a case, then there's a project, then there's an initiative. Case is a man or two or a person or two and maybe a group. A project is a few and maybe 2 or 3 organizations. An initiative is global. They designated as a global. We had 1,600 individuals in the database. We had 1,200 law enforcement actions that were taken in the first 9 months of the case. I myself was commended for finding 300 terrorists related to the case.
Jeez.
I was telling you about first big group I worked with when I was active duty was Muslim Brotherhood. Because that is the center of gravity of the entire global Islamic movement.
Yep.
That's the sun of the solar system. They are the father of virtually every terrorist group there is. Along with that, I also worked on another group I was telling you about, Tablighi Jamaat, the Deobandi group, the Army of Darkness. And then after that, I was working at the National Targeting Center. I was telling you about the Hezbollah case, the drug smuggling, money laundering, selling cars, used cars in West Africa. Well, I sat next to the officer who ran that case in our division, and we had impromptu conversations all the time about false passports coming from Venezuela they weren't South Americans, they were from Iran coming into America, or the tri-border area, which a lot of us have heard about, or the Palestinian community in Santiago, Chile, or the Panama Free Trade Zone. Lebanese individuals are integrated into all of these communities. And we knew as early as 7, 8, 9, but really started gaining momentum in 10, 11, and 12, that this whole big smuggling operation was going on, bringing cocaine into the United States and or transporting across the Atlantic in high-speed boats, offloading it in Western Africa, transporting it overland with some of those guys with the turbans that ride on the camels, just like the old days, and transiting across the Gibraltar into Spain. I knew as early as 06 the highest per capita consumption of cocaine was Spain because of all the traffic coming in from Hezbollah. And we knew about it. And now we've discovered in the last 2 or 3 weeks or so that the Obama administration shut the case down. And when that came onto the wire and in the news, it hit me like a wave. It took me right back to the time I was working at the Advanced Targeting Team, sitting next to the guys that were running the case, while I was working on the Tablighi case, side by side, in the same little office. It gave me a perspective on what the Obama administration had actually done. They had literally intruded, just walked right in and shut these cases down at the highest possible level. These were the highest level cases. You're talking CIA, DOD, FBI, DOJ, DHS, CBP, Border Patrol, ICE, all of them working together like we're supposed to and shut the cases down. Back to the original where we started, rules of engagement. We don't want you working on these cases because we are geniuses. We know better. We have foreign policy plans that we don't want to be interrupted by these inconvenient and pesky cases that you guys are working on. So we're going to shut them down. As a matter of fact, we're going to shut you down too while we're at it. We don't like your attitude. And they ruin careers of people. And they would have put me in jail. The only saving thing that I had is I always had nexus to everything that I did. I always had a nexus to the case. I never browsed. I never violated protocol. I never sent information inappropriately. I followed every single rule. And thank God I did. Because if I violated subsection 8-B3, that just made that up, I would have been dead meat right there.
Do you think we'll ever see criminal charges be brought up on this? Not against you, obviously,
well, no,
but against...
if people like myself have anything to do with it, we certainly will, because I don't intend to give up on this.
You know, Kyle, I was on the outside, and yet from what I saw in my limited exposure, because I was running educational initiatives and I got involved with some investigative work, you couldn't go to the federal government. You couldn't go to the FBI back then. You couldn't trust them because whatever you brought to them was purged out of the system. And then we have Philip Haney here, who to me, I'm sorry, you're a national hero, you really are, because the personal sacrifice that he endured.
Yep.
And, you know, you take a man that you're awarding with the highest citations that are granted to federal law enforcement officers, and at the same time, you bring them up on charges, I think, like he said, 9 times the last time they were convening a grand jury. For what? Because he was doing his job. And during we had a brief conversation while we were driving in today about how words matter. Well, guess what? The Obama administration changed the definition of the words, and they purged the words, and suddenly the federal law enforcement community was rendered ineffective. When he came to me, we chuckled over it a while ago because I didn't know if I could trust Philip when he first reached out to me because of the experiences I had with FBI agents, with affiliate members of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, because they proved that they could not be trusted.
They wouldn't follow through.
Right.
And honestly, I wasn't sure if I could trust you either, but I was out of options.
He was out of options.
Yeah, I needed some way to stay in the chain of command, but yet go forward. And I didn't know how to do it. And he's trying to get to the point of how he helped me make that jump to the next level in the chain of command, which is what I did.
But you know, even beyond that, we were talking about things like the words matter doctrine and things that happened. You know, he's very optimistic about 2018, and I hope everything comes together the way it should. But one of the concerns I have is that you have federal law enforcement and state law enforcement officials out there on the front lines that are totally clueless as to the nature of the threat, because over the last 10 years, they've been reared in a culture that convinced them that the enemies aren't our enemies.
Right.
Everything's been scrubbed, and somebody should pay a hefty price for it. And there's one term that bothers me, Philip. I don't know if you feel like getting into it, but as soon as you start researching the subject matter, you are labeled today as Islamophobic. When that term was actually coined by the Muslim Brotherhood, at least from my perspective, Philip, and it's on par with fitna. And I'd love to have you just elaborate a little bit on that.
Fitna is a word, Arabic word. It means this, to stop the progress of something. Opposition or interference with. We were a fitna to the federal government, guys like me, because we were interfering with their foreign policy decisions and or domestic policy as well. And he was referring to what became known as countering violent extremism. And it was 10 years ago. As you were talking, I was thinking about it. The first memo that surfaced that was a harbinger of what was going to come was called the Words Matter Memo, and it came up in January of 2008. So that was exactly 10 years ago.
That's crazy.
Darn. a lot of stuff and a lot of effort between then and now. So 10 years ago, this emerging policy came where we were not allowed to use the very same words that they use and say hundreds of times every single day. Somehow that would be racist or impolite or inflammatory or lots of different adjectives. And it gradually pushed us further and further and further away from our ability to do our job. And it wasn't just me by any means. I was just one of many. And that's why morale in DHS among the three major agencies, CBP, ICE, and Border Patrol, the Greens, the Blues, and the Black and Whites, is consistently the lowest among all federal agencies because we were the law enforcement bunch.
Sure.
We were supposed to be the watchdogs watching the sheep, and they put us in the kennel. And off down the road goes the sheep flock, and they're getting picked off.
Yeah.
And we're not able to do anything because we've been locked up. And that's, you know, that's how it was like. And so no wonder the morale was poor. It wasn't some sort of thing where we were complaining because we weren't getting paid enough.
Right.
Or we didn't have enough benefits or good retirement. We did.
You just couldn't do the jobs that you were hired to do.
The job that we took the oath to take, which brings us all the way back to the beginning. Just like guys in the military in overseas operations that have these impossible rules of engagement. They get hurt because of it, and they're not able to do what they're sent there to do. And so us in law enforcement and us in military, we're brothers in arms because we're really trying to do the same thing, protect our country from threat both foreign and domestic. You know that the two primary responsibilities of the federal government are to prevent foreign invasion from foreign power, and outbreaks of domestic violence in the states. Did you know that?
I did not.
That's part of the Constitution. And so outbreaks of domestic violence at the state level is a primary responsibility of the federal government. And so it's all connected. They're all gears in the same transmission. And if you mess up with one gear, the whole thing breaks, falls apart. So am I optimistic? No, I'm determined. I don't evaluate things in terms of optimism. I evaluate things like a tank. I'm a tank.
I like that.
I'm just going to go. I don't care what I have to climb over or bash through. I'm not going to hurt. I'm not going to violate the law. I'm not going to abrogate Constitution. That's what I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about you put me in there and I'm just going to go do what tanks are supposed to do on behalf of our country.
There's a book about the tank.
Yeah?
Tell me about it.
Oh, the tank.
This is the shameless plug.
Promo. See something, say nothing. Some of the people have been watching the news lately about the protests in Iran may have noticed that the former Obama administration officials were advising President Trump that the best thing that they could do if he really wanted to help the Iranians was to be quiet. Really. And I thought of the title of the book. You see something going on at that macro level over in a country that people are suffering in, and you're told by the Obama people the best thing you can do is be quiet. And that's why I called it, and this is 2 years ago, see something, say nothing, because if we did say something, we got in all kinds of trouble. If you go downtown New York, or if you go on an international flight, you'll hear that at TSA. If you see something, say something.
Right.
But did they ever tell you what you're supposed to see? And did they ever tell you what you're supposed to say if you do see something? People who have tried it have found themselves in a lot of trouble. Remember the clock boy issue?
Yeah.
What happened to them?
Oh,
the teacher?
And the media
who
shaming.
Would go through that? He ends up in the White House as a hero. Poor little kid.
With his radical dad.
What about what the people who lived around Syed Farouk said? Remember? We would have said something, but we were afraid of being called racist.
Yep.
That's Islamophobia. That's the power of that word. And he was referring, words do matter. And what I want to do is take the clicker. I'm tired of watching that same dopey channel. And I hate those commercials that we see over and over. I'm going to change the channel to the Constitution channel. Let's try this for a while.
I like that.
That's what I'm trying to do.
So in this book, people will read about, because I actually read the book and I didn't realize, I didn't put 2 and 2 together
Until just now?
Boston Marathon bombing,
Yeah.
a lot in here. Also read, I don't know if you're familiar with Michelle McPhee, she also wrote a book about how much the administration knew and how much the FBI knew.
Yeah, they did know.
How can people get the book?
Oh, it's on Amazon.
Awesome. Awesome. What does America mean to you? Final thoughts, gentlemen.
It's freedom. That's our freedoms and our liberties. Everything that we enjoy was paid for with the blood of patriots. And we really do owe them a debt of gratitude. And people today, I think a lot of them just fail to realize what kind of sacrifice was made on their behalf, or sacrifices that were made on their behalf, because they're spoiled. They don't know what it is. You've got people that hold socialism in high regard. Look at Venezuela. They don't go
That's
there.
going real
They
well for
haven't
them.
seen the failures.
You asked me about what is America to me. Before I answer that, I want to mention that, were you law enforcement or military?
Neither.
Okay, well, the guys out there, and women out there that are either, what would they feel like if they were stripped of their weapon in public?
Naked?
Naked. Perfect word, because that's what you feel like. Everybody on your team knows, what did Haney do now? He must have really messed up this time. They do it on purpose to humiliate you.
Got it.
But I didn't take it as a humiliation, because I was, again, like a tank. They gave me an 11-month sabbatical, so I used all my time to get all my paperwork and documents put in order, and I put it in there.
Awesome.
In the book. But what America means to me, I want to refer back to President Lincoln in his second address to Congress in 1862. He said that the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate for the stormy present, that the occasion is piled high with difficulties, but we must rise with the occasion, and that as our case is new, so we must think anew and we must act anew. We must all disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country, the last best hope on earth. And that's what America means to me.
I love it. I love it. I got nothing else. There's nothing that I could say to top that. So I will just say thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for standing
Anytime.
by that oath no matter what.
Pleasure, my friend.
Thank you, brother.
I'd love to come back and tell you some more stories, a few months from now.
Oh, you're going to be
Yes.
absolutely. We're going to have you on the Whiskey Patriots next.
Okay.
That's going to be great.
If I don't drink whiskey, is it okay?
Well, so here's the thing, and it's actually a great question that a lot of people ask. So our founding fathers, when they were writing the Constitution, sipped whiskey because they didn't have regular access to clean drinking water. And back then, whiskey was actually used as a currency.
Right.
So to us, it's not actually about the whiskey. We rarely drink, ironically, but to us, whiskey represents the principles and values that our country was
I
founded
got a
upon.
suggestion for you.
Uh-oh.
You can augment your arsenal.
Yep.
Porter ale.
Oh, I'll drink porter ale with you.
Because porter ale, I found out through reading a great book called Drinking with Republicans, all the Republican presidents, that the founding fathers, when they were arguing politics, probably in pubs not too far from here, drank porter ale. And I never heard of it before I read the book. So I decided I'm going to find out what porter ale actually is.
I like
and
that.
I found it out, and now it's by far and away my favorite beer. So, for those of us who don't drink whiskey,
Well, it's up to you. You got to bring it in.
we can bring
That's how this
porter
rolls.
ale.
All right, and I found the vast majority of Democratic lawmakers drink green tea lattes.
Stout.
Very, very fitting.
A hearty drink.
Very fitting.
Anyway,
Yeah,
well, thank you so much,
but-
guys. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for taking the time to hit the share button on this. These are powerful and important stories about patriotism and America, so we are super appreciative of you. So, gentlemen, God bless, and God bless America.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bet. Thank you, everybody.